All right, Mr. Evan. First off, thanks for being here. This is actually the first interview. I interviewed you, man, it's been over a year now for my last summit, and a lot of things have changed. You've added stuff to Story Origin, which we'll get to if people don't know what Origin is and stuff like that. But I really appreciate you being here. I know you're busy. You're always doing stuff behind the scenes and stuff like that. So your time is very appreciated and valued. So just for the sake of conversation, if anybody doesn't know who you are, which I just can't imagine is the case, right? If you want to give us a brief background, kind of to who you are, and I think a really cool way to start this off would be what made you get into the authoring world, and specifically for you, like why did you want to create Story Origin based off everything that you saw out there?
Yeah, like you said, my name is Evan Gao. I'm the indie developer, is what I call myself, behind Story Origin. And what that means is I'm the engineering department, the customer support, the marketing department. Anything that you either love or hate about Story Origin, it's my fault. I'm sorry, or you're welcome, as the case may be. Um, I I got started with building Story Origin over 6 years ago now. It's kind of crazy to think about. Um, but uh, the reason that I got into it was I used to write short stories back in high school, and I've always had an interest in writing. And then in college, I got interested in technology and entrepreneurship. And then I went to work for a few years. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, now's the time. I want to try to get back into writing. And then I also want to build tools in technology that helps writers as well. So I left my previous role and I went and I talked to a bunch of authors about what tools they were using, both to help me and also figure out what things I might do to help authors. And from those authors, I heard, okay, I use this service to build my mailing list. I use this service to create universal book links. I use this other service to find reviewers. I use some combination of Facebook groups and Google Forms to arrange newsletter swaps with other authors. And then I build these pages on my website and I have like a spreadsheet for tracking my word count and a spreadsheet for distributing audiobook promo codes. And it's just okay. So you've got like 8 logins, like 5 spreadsheets. You just have like a lot of things going on here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build one platform that will manage all of those things for you. And I think had you heard me say that to you 6 years ago, that I was going to build one thing that would do all of that and do it in a way that was not uh, terrible, I think you would have said, Evan, I don't believe you. And that's probably the nicest way you would have said that. But here we are, right? So now Story Origin, you can do all of those things: build your mailing list, find reviews, increase sales, run cross promotions with other authors, manage beta copies, audiobook promo codes, build your website. You can do it all from one place. Um, and it's all laid out in a way that is pretty intuitive for most authors to get started using. And I always co-locate like tutorial videos and support documentation and feature explanations right in the dashboard in Story Origin next to the stuff that you use. It's not like some separate website where you need to go and search through a bunch of stuff. It's just like, here's the feature, here's how to use it. So Story Origin does a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, it's I've been using it for a while now, and I was using it before me and you got connected, and then obviously when I was starting to put together my first summit, which is in my third now, I was like, I never thought you would be like somebody who would talk to me and come let me interview and stuff like that. But it worked out, and we stay in touch and talk and stuff like that. Um, but it's like it's just like basically this one stop shop where and I see this because I'm in the trenches all the time because I'm an author. I write books, I publish, and I help authors as well. So it's like I see the frustration of authors when they're like, well, I have to use and pay for this platform to do this. I have to use and pay for this platform to do this. Or even if it's free, now I have to go figure out how to do all of this and then either figure out a way to integrate it or then I have to like manually important. Like it just gets really cumbersome and confusing. And I've noticed, and this is something I talk about a lot when it comes to story origin when I'm talking to people, is a lot of authors, and I apologize if I'm putting you in this bucket and you don't belong in this bucket, but a lot of authors, just from my experience from talking to them and interacting with them, they're not the most technologically advanced or technologically savvy, I guess. So the easier something is to navigate and use and have help on, I think is just so underappreciated, but it's so valuable. And like Story Origin's user interface is just like it's seamless and it's so easy. And you Story Origin does something I don't see a lot of other places is like you said, you're embedding those specific articles, blogs, videos that will help you with whatever you're looking at, as opposed to going and typing something in the search bar and then it pulls up all these articles and you have to figure out which one it is you're trying to find. Then you click on it and you go on this page, it's got all this other stuff on it. Um, so yeah, I think that's really cool too, making it a really simple, easy to use platform, but at the same time, it does a lot of stuff. So you're right. I would have said you're crazy, and maybe I would have said it less nicely because it's like there's no way you can take all that stuff, put it into one platform, and it's not going to be crazy, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it's you know, you're like the developer, and you call your, I call you the mad genius behind closed doors, because you're constantly you're not just sitting on your hands thinking, okay, Story Origin is kind of where it's at. I think it's good. You're always looking for new things to add, whether it's what's trending in the market. We had this conversation last week about certain things that are kind of coming into the light right now that are popular. Um, so it's kind of staying current and making sure things are up to date and optimized and useful, which is probably the best word for it. But for the purpose of this conversation, that was a really long-winded way to come to this point here. Is Story Origin is a wonderful and awesome place, especially for people who are just starting out, to build your mailing list, which is pivotal in terms of how successful you're going to be as an author. A lot of other things come into play, right? You got to have a good book. You got to make sure all these other pieces are in place. But to me, if you're talking ROI, email list is where you're going to get that best return on investment. And a great place to do that is Story Origin. So if you want to kind of explain how that's done in Story Origin and kind of, I think while you're explaining it, people will see it's really simple and not that hard to
Yeah.
manage and navigate yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And to your point about, Story Origin being sort of easy to use and intuitive, that goes back to I am, it all comes back to me, everything that you love or hate about it. So if you ever run into issues, you email me, right? And there's no overhead between the customer support department and the engineering departments. If I get too many emails where people are running into trouble, then I make it easier so that I get less emails about that thing, right? Like I'm highly incentivized to make things easy for authors to do. Um, and So going to starting your building your mailing list, regardless of, we're gonna be covering a lot of terminology that authors may not be familiar with, and like it might not sink in this first conversation, in this conversation that we have, right? So for authors, if you have any trouble keeping up with this conversation, there's always the tutorials tab on Story Origin that has like uh lots of like explainer videos and in-depth guides about this stuff. And then also if you go to your Story Origin dashboard, you'll hit the build mailing list button text box, and it'll give you a checklist of all the things that we're going to talk about here. But to get started with building your mailing list, the first question that you really have to answer is like, why would someone want to be on my mailing list, right? Why would someone want to join, right? You have to overcome that hurdle for anyone, because most people, they don't want to necessarily be on someone else's someone else's mailing list, right? So to answer that question, for most authors, the answer is you want to give them something of value. And what's of value to readers? Books and stories, right? For fiction authors, usually what I recommend is a prequel short story to their book or their series. For nonfiction authors, that might be something like a workbook or some kind of schedule or planner or something. It can be quite varied, some kind of handout, something like that. But the point being, You want to give, create something that a reader is going to love, and you give that to them for free when they sign up to your mailing list. And that thing that you're giving them, we call that a reader magnet. It's something that draws them into joining your mailing list. So that's what I would recommend getting started with. Do you want to talk a little bit about reader magnets before we jump into anything else, or?
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know what a reader magnet is, like Evan explained, it's literally just a free piece of writing that's your style, it needs to match the genre you're writing in. So don't think like, oh, well, I currently publish romance, but I've got this, suspense thing I was working on one time and I let go. Maybe I'll just use that. But if you're trying to draw people into your romance list and you're giving away something that's not a romance piece of writing, it's going to be a disaster because you're getting the wrong people on your list. So the most important thing isn't getting as many people on your list as you can, it's getting as many of the right people on your list. So it needs to match and align with whatever it is you're writing. And I like the idea of like a prequel to, maybe even if you haven't published your first book yet, you can knock out like a 10 to 20,000 maybe like short story or something that kind of leads into the book, or it could even be a standalone as long as it's in the same genre, right? It doesn't have to be a prequel. um
Right.
I will say I've tested this, so I for myself anyways, is like I've tested like a full book and I've tested chapters of that same book, and the amount of subscribers I get with the full book compared to the chapters is drastically different because people, the sexier, for lack of a better term, the reader magnet can be, the more appealing it is going to be to more people to want to give them your personal information, which is their email, but without anything in place for them to incentivize them, like you said, to give you their information. They're just not going to just sign up for your list for nothing in return. Like that's not how humans work. So yeah, it's just something you absolutely need if you're going to start building your email list, or I mean, you're just going to be stuck spinning your wheels in the mud, in my opinion, anyways. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, like if you have book one written, and you can start building your mailing list today by just creating a sample version of that book, like, take the first three chapters of it. You can use that to start building your mailing list today, and then you can always write the prequel or something later too. Uh, I am always an advocate of tearing down whatever roadblocks uh, authors say they have to building a mailing list. Usually that's like, I don't have something to use as a reader magnet. Well, do you have a bunch of short stories that are, in the same genre? Like, make a little anthology. That's fine. It doesn't need to be a prequel to your book or your series, right? It can just be like an anthology of short stories you've written, or you can take the first couple of chapters out of your book and use that as your reader magnet. The other common thing authors think is they've been talking to authors that have been running their own mailing list for like 4 or 5 years. And those authors are like, yeah, I've got this welcome sequence and it has like these branches where if they click on this button, it'll take them over to this mailing list, and they click this other button, it'll take them to this other mailing list. And I've got all these fancy automations and stuff like that. I guarantee you that person did not start with such an advanced welcome sequence, right? I'm not even sure that the efficacy of having really complicated welcome sequences is actually that high or valuable. Um, you should create a welcome sequence. I recommend generally like a 3 or 4 email welcome sequence, but guarantee you a lot of those authors that have, thousands of people on their mailing list, they might not have even had a welcome sequence to their mailing list when they got their first 100 subscribers or whatever, right? So whatever roadblocks you sort of put up in your own path because you hear from these other authors that have been doing this for a much longer time, like, oh, I need to have all this stuff like them. You don't. Like a very simple 1 email welcome sequence. Hey, thanks for joining my list. That's all it says. It's better than nothing, right? And if that's what you can do today to get started, you will be much better off starting to build your mailing list if you start it today rather than tomorrow, or a month from now, or whatever whatever sort of things that you feel like are blocking you from doing that, right? um so yeah, so whatever you've got in terms of a reader magnet, whatever you can use to draw people in, does not need to be like a prequel short story or whatever necessarily, right? That's generally the highest efficacy thing for fiction authors, um but is not like the only thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm the same way too. Anytime I talk to an author and they're like, well, I've been thinking about starting an email list for a long time, but I still don't have this done. My website's not built. I don't have 5 books published, or like all these like crazy. And I mean, to them and even to me, like sometimes it sounds really rational and like it makes sense, but it's like, okay, let's take a step back, and it's like, okay, let's say all these things that you're saying are roadblocks. Let's say they're valid. What harm is there to even just getting started and trying to start gaining some ground as early as you can? There's no harm in it. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to probably start to slowly build up, and then you're going to get used to it, and then you're going to know how to build on it, and then things are going to get more laid out and streamlined, and by the time things are really taken off, you're not starting from scratch, which can be kind of a headache, because I did things backwards. I tell people this all the time. I wrote and published my book before anything, no website, no email list, no reader magnet, like nothing. Cause I was just like, I'm going to publish my book. It's going to take off. Maybe I'll write a second, but like this first one's going to crush. Like this is real. Like I really thought
Yeah.
this to myself. And I hear this too, like from people. It's like, it's not an uncommon thing because you see all these
Mhm.
other, to your point, which is a great point, people comparing themselves up to like, it'd be like me being really bummed out because I don't have as much money as Elon Musk. Well,
Yeah.
let's take a look at what all he's done, how long he's been doing it, and he's a unicorn. Like nobody can
Yeah.
really compare themselves to Elon Musk because he's kind of in a league of his own. I don't look up and compare myself to James Patterson or Stephen King or anything because they've been doing it for decades. So you
Yeah.
need to just start and be comfortable starting with wherever you're at. And I like your point about the whole complicated, really cool flowing, automation onboarding sequence where it's like they go here, if they click this, they go here, they click here, they're out, and I move them here. Like to me, I don't see the point of it. I think simplicity is what scales because it's something you're not only going to be able to handle now, but when things really take off and the workload's bigger, it's still going to be easy to manage because it's really simple. Um, so
Right.
yeah, I'm always
Ab-
of mind of keeping it as simple as possible, kind of like what you were talking about for sure.
you do not need a website to start building your mailing list. You
No.
do not need to have a published book to start building your mailing list. You don't need to have anything to start a mailing list, essentially, right? You need a reader magnet is what you really need. And that again can be like a 10 to 20,000 word short story, which should take you, maybe a month to crank out, right? Or something, right? Everybody has their own writing speed. Some people might be able to do that in a day, right? But point being, yeah, it should not be something that you need months and months to get sorted out. And the sooner that you can start the better, right? Because especially like you were saying, you published a book and then you had to go and figure out the marketing on the back end after you've published the book. If you can start to build your mailing list before you've published, you know, book one in a series or something like that, and you've gotten an audience that you've built up through like a prequel short story or an anthology of short stories in the same genre, then when you go to launch your paid books, you'll actually have an audience to launch to rather than launching to crickets and then trying to figure out the marketing afterwards. And I think that is generally uh, a that is a thing that many people do, authors, entrepreneurs, etc., right? Like, even for, like when you're building a tech product, it's like, I'll just build this thing, I'll spend 6 months doing all this engineering, and then I'll figure out the marketing like after I built the product. And it's like, well, if you had built an audience first, then you would actually be able to see, is the thing that you're building something that the audience actually likes, and then you don't because what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs is they spend 6 months building the thing, And then they go and find the audience for it and say, hey, here's the thing I built. And they go, oh, actually, I don't like this. I want this. Right. This is why I went and I talked to a bunch of authors before I ever built Story Origin. Right. I was like, I had this idea of the thing that I wanted to build. And then I went and I talked to a bunch of authors and I was like, oh, here's the valuable parts. Authors want to make more money.
Shocker.
Right. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, how do I help authors make more money? Right. And that's, helping them build their mailing list, helping them get reviews on their books, like helping them cross promote each other, like cross promote their books on sale and stuff like that. Right. That is at the end of the day what you're trying to do. So, yeah. So for authors, like if you can start to build that audience before you ever launch a paid book, that is, you'll be better off for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I have a graveyard of on the entrepreneurial side of stuff. I have a graveyard of products that I thought were going to be awesome. I made the cardinal sin mistake of this is going to be great. Everybody's going to want it. You make it and they're like, this is absolutely nothing of what I need right now. And then you just spent all that time, even if it's just a week or, maybe you spent like 8 or 10 hours putting something together you thought was going to be awesome. Like, and it's harder to do. Like, let me say that it's harder to do when you don't have an audience because there's really nobody to go ask, but there's still things you can do like research online. I don't like social media, but join relevant Facebook groups or go look at like subreddits of things that are happening in your niche or market. And it's like, see what's working, what people are talking about. And then you can see the buzz that's going on. But like in terms of, a book, I think it's really cool once you have an audience. I do this all the time. I pull my list all the time on both sides. So it's like, hey, I have an idea of a new short story or a new novella or like a new reader magnet. Like here's some really short descriptions. This is by no mean like a blurb that I'd put on Amazon, but like here's a really short description, and you lay like 5 or 6 out and you send it to your list, and you'll see almost every single time without fail there will be an overwhelming answer to what the audience wants the most. Um, and for an author, that's really cool because you're like, maybe you've written 3 or 4 books in a series and you're kind of tapped out on it, and you want to write something else. Just put some ideas in front of your audience, get some feedback, and then you know exactly what to write for them that you should be able to sell. If not, it's going to be easier to sell to them because you got their input and feedback, which kind of a bonus. People love that. People love to
The readers, yeah,
feel
readers
included
love
and
to be
stuff
a
like
part of
that.
your journey. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think you mentioning that's really, really cool. And you kind of brought in like the entrepreneurial side of things. Like it happens across the board in all industries.
Hmm.
Um, but it's really important in the authoring world because, and you tell me if you see this too, is a lot of people I talk to, especially fiction authors, since that's the theme of the summit who we're talking to, is like a lot of them don't have this business mindset. And I didn't before either. And it wasn't till I can't remember who I talked to, or maybe it was just reading or listening to enough podcasts or relevant information, whatever it is. It's like, if you're really, really serious about making this a long-term career or a career at all, or making money off your books, like there needs to be some kind of shift in your mindset where you're thinking on a
Yeah.
business side of things. Like you have your authoring mind, you also have your business mind, which is where the marketing comes into play, right? So that's where things like Story Origin, we're going to dive a little deeper into this, becomes so important because it allows you to go do these things that might otherwise be really complicated or multi-platform, where you'll have to go use this platform, this platform, and this platform just to do the 3 things you're trying to do. Um, so yeah, do you think that's kind of a common theme with fiction authors? Is that kind of like business marketing mindset's kind of lacking a lot of times?
I think it, yeah, I would say, it kind of, it's just very dependent. I mean, I wouldn't say that it is common in certain sort of parts of the author community, and then it's uncommon in other parts of the author community, right? Like in certain parts of the author community, it's very business decision analysis oriented. And then, but for a lot of authors who like aren't parts of like those communities, it's, yeah, they have not thought that way about it necessarily. um and so for a lot of authors, it's making that decision to think about it, right? You don't even have to arrive at the conclusion that, yes, you want to do this as a full-time thing and that that is what your goal is, right? Maybe it's just that you decide that your goal is you just like writing and you don't really ever want to try to or care about, whether more than 5 people read it, right? Like maybe your goal is just, I enjoy writing, and if no one ever reads it, that's fine. And like, that's great. That's a totally fine answer. But spending some time to think about and figure out, is your goal just writing because you enjoy it, or is your goal writing because that's something that you want to be able to do and make your living from it, and to not have to go into a 9 to 5, work in an office, doing stuff that you don't like. You just have to make that decision. Are you trying to do this to make a full-time income from it so that that can be your entire sort of, focus in life? And so, either, arriving at either conclusion is totally fine, right? Like those are both good answers for the individual. But I find that there are definitely a lot of people who would like to do it full time and make a living from it, but they are not thinking like that. They're thinking about it like a person who just writes for fun, for sure. So, um, so yeah, definitely spend some time thinking about what your goals are, and because yeah, once you decide that you want to be serious about it, then that makes coming up with a plan to see that vision through, uh it's just becomes much more attainable, right? You're not going to be as wishy-washy about whether or not you want to, build a mailing list, or do you want to like build a review team, or do you want to um build a website or something like that, right? Becomes, all those decisions become much easier, and you can figure out the path from here to there easier, as long as you actually have some sort of vision in mind.
Yeah, I like that approach. It's kind of subjective to the author, like you're saying. It's, you don't have to have the goal of making, $10,000 a month from your book. If you do, that's great, but like that, it doesn't have to be your goal. So I mean, you nailed it. Like your your efforts and your strategy and your mindset just all correlates to what you as an author wants from your writing. And that can and it if, like you said, you just want to sell 5 books, or you just want to be able to hold a hard copy in your hand and that's your goal, I think that's just as important of a goal as somebody who wants to make a full-time living, because it's subjective to the author. There's no right or wrong goal. There's no this goal's better than this goal. It's just, who are you? Where are you in your life? What are you wanting to get from this? And I think any broad spectrum of answers, I think, is the best answer. It's just, I
Right.
know it's
Yeah.
like a really generalized answer, but I think like not trying to, and maybe I was kind of going down the wrong path, because I don't want anybody to think there's like this, exclusivity factor of authors where it's like, if you don't have the goal of making a lot of money, then there's no reason for you to do it. Like, no, there are absolutely other goals you can have that are perfect. But I think for probably most people watching this or listening, however they're taking it in, or reading the transcripts, I guess I could never do that. They're probably here because maybe, even if it's not, maybe they don't have like a really audacious goal, there's probably some kind of inkling or kind of maybe spark in there somewhere where they want to do something a little more with it, or else maybe they wouldn't be sitting through all these interviews and listen to me talk to 20 different people, because that can get exhausting. I understand people. So yeah, I like the way you kind of reframed what I was saying, because that makes it a little less scary, and it doesn't just put everybody into the same one bucket. So if somebody feels left out, they might like just stop trying to go after it because they don't have this big goal that they think everybody else
Yeah.
has.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. The goal, whatever the goal is, whatever your goal may be is fine. The only thing that's not fine is not spending time thinking about
That's right. Yeah,
it.
that part's
You have
crucial.
to figure out what your goal is. That is the only thing I will say that you need to do. And then whatever that goal ends up being, that's great.
Yeah, you can't plan out a strategy if you don't know what the
Yeah.
goal is. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
Yeah.
point. Um,
Um,
You
Yeah.
want to?
So
No, go ahead.
so if your goal is, to try to make a full-time income and stuff like that from writing, or even just, trying to make some amount of money from writing, yeah, building a mailing list is an incredibly important part of that journey. And so writing your reader magnet is the first thing that I would recommend you do. But from there, I would recommend the second step being to start to run cross promotions with other authors. So there are two types of cross promotions. There are newsletter swaps. That's a direct one-to-one cross promotion. That's saying, hey, you've got a mailing list of 1,000 people. I've got a mailing list of 1,000 people. I'll agree to promote one of your books in one of my upcoming newsletters if you agree to promote one of my books in one of your upcoming newsletters. And the reason, so, cross promotions like this, they're growing, fairly quickly, and authors are turning to them because they're free. Number one, right? Like, I don't need to pay anyone or pay you. We're just agreeing to exchange mentions of each other's books in our newsletters. Like, we're not paying each other for this, right? The second thing is, it's pretty easy. You don't need to figure out like bidding strategies or targeting or like some complicated ads dashboard or anything like that, right? It's literally, I'm writing an email and then I copy and paste your link into my email. That is the extent of what you really need to do in a newsletter swap. And then last thing is it's targeted by genre, right? So I know when I cross promote with another author, if they write in the same genre as me, then I'm going to be reaching the right audience. Like, I'm not just, posting stuff to Twitter and Facebook and hoping that someone that likes my books and likes my genre is going to happen upon it, right? Like, I know when I cross promote with another author in their genre and they're sending it to their mailing list, those subscribers are on their mailing list because they like that genre. And so yeah, so cross promotions are growing quickly, and so newsletter swaps are one of those types of cross promotions. That's a sort of a direct one-to-one cross promotion. The other type of cross promotion is called a group promotion. And a group promotion is where you, me, and let's say 20 other authors, we all list our books on a single landing page, right? So there will be like 20 different book covers on this landing page, and then we all send the link to that landing page to our own newsletters, and so we're all driving our traffic to that single group promotion landing page, and so we're all working together as a team. So those two types of cross promotions can have different goals. You might want to build your mailing list, right? So there you would be promoting a reader magnet. So you can run newsletter swaps to promote your reader magnet with other authors, or you can run group promos or join group promos where the authors in that are all promoting their reader magnet. So everyone's building their mailing lists together. But you can also arrange cross promotions to promote your review copies, right? So where you're building your review team, people are requesting access, and they'll say where they're going to leave a review. Or you can be promoting your universal book links where readers will be taken to whatever their preferred retailer for that book is, Amazon or Kobo or Barnes and Noble, etc., right? Or you might be promoting your audiobook promo code. So if you produce an audiobook through ACX or Findaway or another producer, usually you'll get some promo codes to download those free books on Audible or Spotify or wherever, right? And you want to distribute those to reviewers, right? So you might be trying to get more reviews on your audiobooks. So those cross promotions being, you can have any sort of range of goals that you want with them. But when it comes to mailing list building, that is where I would recommend most authors start. And it doesn't matter if you have 0 subscribers on your mailing list, you can absolutely apply for cross promotions with other authors, even if they've got a mailing list of 500, 800, 1,000 people on it, and you've got 0 people on your mailing list, there's a good chance that when you apply to arrange a newsletter swap with that person, that they're going to accept it, because having those deals in other books for authors or readers to look at in, like, let's say I'm writing a newsletter, I've got a bunch of readers, there's 2 parts of my newsletter that I'm going to have, right? There's a section where I'm trying to build rapport with my audience, where I'll talk about, here's some funny things that happened this week. You know, I ordered what I thought was going to be 1 bottle of soy sauce from Walmart, and it ended up being 12 bottles of soy sauce because the product image on Walmart was wrong, right? So here's me holding up 12 bottles of soy sauce. Right? Stuff like that, like stuff that just happened in your week, or just like, here's me and my dog out on a walk, right? Like, does not need to be even particularly like interesting. It's just like, here I am, I'm a human. Like, I love to connect with other people about the stuff, right? So that's one part of the newsletter. The other part of the newsletter is where you're sharing like other books that your readers might be interested in, right? And that is the reason that a lot of readers are going to open your email, right? They'll read the section where you're, you know, sharing about your week and stuff like that. But if you only ever sent emails about like, here's me and my dog going on a walk, and you sent them an email like every 2 weeks, like, here's me and my dog going on a walk, they're going to stop opening your emails, right? Readers are always on the lookout for what other books they might be interested in, though, right? Always. So if you send in your newsletter every couple of weeks or once a month or whatever, here's some other books that you might be interested in, that's a reason that the readers are going to keep opening your emails, right? Week after week or month after month. So even if I have 0 people on my mailing list and you've got 1,000 people on your mailing list, like, you are looking for people to, you're looking for things to promote in your newsletter, to share with your audience, because you want people opening your newsletter, right? And so, yeah, getting started, even if you have 0 subscribers, you can arrange, you know, group promos and newsletter swaps. I was talking to an author the other day, and they said they'd signed up to StoryOrigin, and within 24 hours, they had already been accepted into 2 group promos and had already arranged 3 newsletter swaps, and they had 0 people on their mailing list. And this was within 24 hours of joining StoryOrigin. So it's, yeah, don't let the having 0 subscribers thing stop you from starting.
Yeah, and that's a big one too, because I can remember like it was yesterday when I had 0 people, and that worry and that kind of thing in your mind that's telling you you've got 0 people. How in the world are you ever going to get any stranger to get on your your email list? Because it is a scary concept to think about when you're first
Yeah.
getting started. But one of the reasons I really, really like StoryOrigin, and when I'm teaching workshops or master classes or webinars, like whatever it is, on email marketing and list building, one of the main sections is on StoryOrigin. And one of the main reasons for that is, especially for people just getting started, I have found StoryOrigin to be the platform that's the most open armed for new authors with no people on their list or 10 people on their list. Because there's a lot of other platforms too. For example, like, there's BookFunnel, which I use and I like BookFunnel, but I don't know why, but authors will put more restrictions on the ability to join promos, from like, you must have 500 people on your list, no samples or excerpts or chapters, must be full books. Like all these, even some of them make you fill out these like extensive Google forms, which I never understand, by the way, because that's like, sometimes I'll open it, be like, I don't want to do this, I'll just move on to the next one. Where StoryOrigin, it's a really simple process. It takes like a minute to go through, if that, and you are joining these promos with other people, and literally probably 99% of the time you're going to get accepted. You might come across the occasional guy or gal who is a little bit more cutthroat with who joins, but I've been doing it for a couple of years. I don't ever see that ever. It's very open. And even for me, I constantly have people that apply for me, whether it's newsletter swaps or group promos, that are just getting started, or have 10 people, or have 1 person, and they might be the 1 person on their list, right? And I actually love taking those people in, because I can always think about, and remember what it felt like to be on that level
Right.
coming up and it being really scary. So I'm like, man, if I can get 3 or 4 of these people in, I mean, that in a week, in 3 to 4 weeks time, they're gonna have, 50, 100 people on their list. And then they're never gonna be at that same spot again. And then they'll build up and hopefully it'll just kind of pay it pay it forward as people are coming up, they're doing the same thing for the next person. That person gets built up,
Right.
they're doing the next thing, same thing for the next person. So I really love kind of like the community aspect of Story Origin being so open and friendly and welcoming, which is funny because you're not actually interacting with these people, like these authors, you're just joining or people are joining yours and stuff like that. But just the kind of the open environment that comes with Story Origin, I've always found to be really cool, which is why I always say it's great for the new author, but it's also great if you have an established list, but especially for people just getting started out. I don't think there's a better place to go in terms of getting your feet wet and kind of getting off the ground, and moving and stuff like that. So
Yeah. That is, yeah. I mean, that is
I'm not
something
endorsed by Story
that
Origin, by the way, people.
that is something that I definitely hear from many authors is just like the community on Story Origin is always very accepting of authors who are just starting out. And I think it's to your point, many authors got started on Story Origin, uh, and within a few months, they've built their mailing list up to a substantial amount, and they're like, no, it was only 2 months ago, 3 months ago that I had 0 people on my mailing list. Why would I think I'm any better than any of these other people that are just starting out? Like, and to deny them the opportunity that I had, right? Like, I don't know, there's there's always something about like, people who like stand on the shoulders of giants or whatever, and then like they like pull the ladder up behind them. Like it's like why? So it's very, the story origin community is very much like a pay it forward mentality, where authors are very much remember when they were just starting out because it was not long ago for many of them. Right.
Yeah, remember the
um,
pain and be
yeah.
kind to the people coming up.
Yeah.
Like that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you don't know um when those people are going to end up being incredibly successful too, right? It's so hard to say, who's gonna, sometimes writing books is a little bit like winning the golden ticket, right? Like in you just blow up for, um for reasons that are kind of hard to figure out. And so you don't know who that's going to be. And so if you can have helped that person out along the way, and they're willing to promote you to their own mailing list, when they get bigger, then great. That's awesome that you help that person along in their journey, and if they're probably going to be a lot more likely to help you along on your journey, if they've caught up to you or surpassed you or whatever, right? And so just always having that pay it forward mentality, just in life. Forget story origin, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
let's do a
please don't
therapy
forget
session
story
here.
origin. Please remember it.
Yeah.
But, but like, just in general, like, it's always just like a very helpful mentality to have for sure.
Yeah, that makes me think of kind of an analogy, if analogy is the right word, but it's like the kid who gets picked on in school, or like this kid was known for bullying this kid. You fast forward 10, 15 years later, that kid that was bullied is now the bully's boss. So it's like, don't put yourself in a situation because you feel like you're holier than thou or you're above everyone else. And listen, I mean, it's across all industries. I see it. Everybody sees it across different industries and stuff like that. So it's like, I always try to teach people, this is kind of off the beaten path of the conversation, but you said let's talk about life. So I'm going to talk about this for a second. Is being authentic, and if you've probably heard me, and if you're listening to this and this isn't the first session you're watching, you've probably heard me say this like 50 times. You're like, oh my gosh, he's going to say authenticity and transparency again. But if you can be authentic and transparent in your messaging, how you treat people, the way you communicate with your email list, the way you interact with other authors or entrepreneurs, whatever it is like that you're doing with your your fiction writing and marketing and stuff like that, it can only, you know, be good for you. That doesn't mean you're for everybody. That doesn't mean you're going to be a millionaire selling author. What that means is people are actually going to see you for your character and who you are because of the way you treat people and how you interact with other people. And it's really hard for that to come back and backfire on you down the road if you're doing it from the start. Because a lot of times I see in authoring and also just in life in general is like you said, the person started here, maybe they were humble because they needed help up. And then as they climb up, they pull the ladder up with them. So it's like, what that did you forget where you were probably not that long ago? Like, hello, I'm you
Yeah.
5 years ago. What's
Yeah.
happening here? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but to get back on track here, sorry, that was kind of a mini therapy session by
I
Evan
think
and
the
I.
authenticity stuff is hugely valuable when talking about mailing list building, though, because
Oh, it's one of my pillars. Yeah, I agree.
it is so valuable when you're writing your newsletters to not pretend to be something that you aren't, or to try to, what I see happens is people, they get emails from like, they get newsletters from corporations, right? And so they think that they have to write their newsletters like they're a corporation, like they're a business. And that is not going to do yourself any favors, because the more that you act like your business and less like you're a person, people aren't going to be as willing to help you out when you ask them a question like, hey, I'm considering writing these various different, stories, which one interests you most, right? Like that's very, people aren't going to be as willing to help out with that kind of thing. Or if you're asking for beta readers for your next book or story or whatever, right? Like, and you want feedback from people on it, people are going to be much more willing to help out if they feel like they know you as a person, and not just you as like this corporate speak newsletter that just says, here are the books that I am promoting this week, and I hope you've had a good week. The end. I don't know. That's my corporate voice, I guess. Um,
Corporate Evan.
yeah, that's corporate Evan. Like I was saying, like, I very much, everything that I talk about with newsletters doesn't come from like me saying, just like making this stuff up. Like, this is stuff that I do personally, because I also write my own newsletter for Story Origin. Mine stuff is about building software for authors, right? But like in my newsletters, you'll see pictures of me, pictures of my dog, pictures of my kid, like stuff that we're doing this week, whether it's, we went to a park, or, this funny thing happened on our walk, or like, it doesn't, it's just like, you know, I made a pie, whatever. Like, it's just normal human stuff. um, and it doesn't need to be particularly thrilling or exciting or anything like that, but just being authentic about like, this is like what my life is like. Um, and and readers and people that are subscribed to your newsletter love to see that stuff, like, because it's giving them a window into your life, that readers rarely have that opportunity to see that window into an author's life, and how that like affects their writing and stuff like that. And so the more that you can bring them with you on that journey, uh, the more that they're also going to be willing to help you on that journey when it comes to you getting beta readers, or you building a review team, or what have you.
Yeah, dude, I 100% agree. And it's not often too when I bring up like being authentic and transparent that people actually return the sentiment, be like, "Oh yeah, I agree with that," and then they kind of share why they do it too. It's usually like I say that, and they're like, "Yeah, that's a great idea," but it's like other people do it too. It's very important. And like I said, like two of my main pillars when it comes to building an email list and marketing your books or just marketing yourself, your brand as an author through your email list, because like that's what I focus on with people when I'm helping is like, and I do it for myself. I'm not teaching or preaching something that I don't do myself, right? So like for
Yeah.
anybody who's on my list, or if you end up on my list, you're going to see very quickly who I am, why I am the way I am, what my life is like, my wife, my 2 kids, I work in a closet. But I remember it's true, it's blurred out because my clothes are over here, my wife's clothes are over there. But I work in a closet. It's very quiet, it's very cozy. Um, but I remember first starting out, and I've talked about this on some other occasions too, but I don't talk about it too often, is I thought I had to be kind of to your point when you were first talking, it was like, I thought I had to be somebody else. I saw somebody who was probably pretty successful and I thought I had to fit into that mold. Even though it was uncomfortable to do, I knew it wasn't me. It probably came off very, you know, not authentic, and they could tell like even if they read an email from me and they saw me on camera, they're like, those don't match at all. Like, what is happening, right? So I used to feel like if I was going to write an email, I had to put a suit and tie on. But as you can
Yeah.
see, I've got a backwards hat on and pink headphones. It is my daughter's favorite color, so you cannot judge me. I do have a daughter, so I'm not a 32-year-old man who just likes wearing pink all the time. But I quickly realized, and some things happened for me to kind of figure it out, but it wasn't just like I just figured it out on my own. But like I needed to be who I was, because that's really the only, you know, differentiating factor for you as an author. Now, the tone, the style, the characters you create, the stories, the stuff like that, like all that can be different. But like you as an author, if we're talking brand, like I can't be Evan. Evan can't be me. Yeah, Brian can't be Philip. Like all these, like you have to be like. I love your emails. I love sometimes I just scroll down and look at whatever picture you put on the email that week.
Yeah.
Like, right, like I usually read it, but
Yeah.
like, where's the
Who cares
email?
about the software updates? You're making
Yeah,
the
what
story
kind of
version of it. I'm
pizza
good.
did Evan eat this week? Like, what did his son do this week? That's so cute.
Yeah.
So you're right. People eat that stuff up because, most people have probably heard this, but people want to do business with people. And
Right.
if you're in the authoring business to make some money, whatever, however much that is, like you need to show those people that you're actually human. Because and you've probably done the same, and I will absolutely never, I can't actually even think of actual names, but I've come across emails where it's like, it's kind of like corporate Evan voice. You can read it and you're like, your corporate voice automatically turns on in your head when you're reading it. Now, maybe that's how that person is in real life, and that's right on brand for them. Maybe it's not. Maybe they fell into the trap I did and they thought that's how they had to be. And I think that's a trap really new people fall into when they're first doing this. So just having that mindset going into it, or trying to have kind of a shift in your mindset when you're starting out, to just, for better or for worse, like wedding vows here, right? In sickness or in health, um, just be you. I mean, that's all I could say. It's like
Yeah.
it's that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. So from a really sort of mechanical standpoint, some things that I recommend. I always recommend addressing your audience as individuals, not as a group. So when you're writing your newsletter, you don't say, hey team, hey gang, hey y'all, howdy y'all, whatever have you, right? Whatever your preferred pluralism is. I always recommend addressing people as an individual. So my newsletters, they're always, hey Philip, you know, like and I write my newsletters like I'm writing to a friend. Like frequently I will have a person in mind that I'm writing that newsletter to. It happens to be going to many thousands more people, but I have like a person in mind, and I'm writing it to them like I'm writing to just them, right? So hey Philip, like here's the stuff that I was working on this weekend, like or this week or whatever. Like here's some things that I'd recommend like you check out on your dashboard. This is what I was like. This is what I was trying to do. This was my goal or whatever. Like just I'm having a conversation with an individual, and like, oh, and like FYI, like here's some other thing like this past week, some other news, like me and my kid, we went to the park and like whatever, he really loved the swings, or like, hey, I'm thinking about buying a grill because Emily made some grilled vegetables over at her parents' house and they were freaking delicious. Do you have like any recommendations for like a grill I might want to buy? Like stuff like that. So like have a person in mind or a friend in mind that you're writing that newsletter to, and that will also help you get into a style or a voice that is probably going to come more from a personal place and less from a here's just a facts of the week kind of a thing, right? Because I know that it can be difficult when you're writing a newsletter to whatever, even just 10 people or 20 people or whatever. It's very easy to um since you're addressing it to a group of people, it's just going to be written differently versus when you're writing it to a single person. So always try to just have that framing in mind of you're just writing it to a single person.
Which is kind of like the way you write a book, right? So for like authors, you're thinking of who's your ideal reader. All that person represents is a group of people. It's not, you're not literally writing to just John or just, Joanne. I don't know why J names are coming to me only, but like that person represents a group of people when you're writing a book, but like that's going to help you actually stay on track for the messaging and the kind of style that you're writing the book around, which of course you need to know your genre, tropes and stuff like that. But like when you're writing an email, it's funny that you say that because I actually do the opposite. I
Mm,
don't have the hey first name. I don't even know if people I don't even know how many first names I have in my email list because it's usually just, you know, from wherever platforms are coming from. Maybe sometimes they give me both, maybe sometimes it's just the email. Um, but I actually address everybody, but I write my email like I'm talking to them. So like I'll use words like you or
mm,
rather than
yeah,
you guys or everyone.
right.
So like even though I'm not addressing them personally, maybe I should test it out. That could be kind of cool. Because I see that too. Like I see your email and it's like even if the person knows you're not writing that email directly to them, the mindset as soon as they see hey your name, like they're like, oh, he's writing me an email. Like it almost feels more personalized, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of a cool point. But yeah, I do the same thing. I feel like I picture I'm just sitting down at coffee with a buddy, or I'm just sitting down at breakfast talking to my wife when I'm writing my emails. Again, it goes back to what's your style and does it match your authenticity of who you are and the kind of personality you have. But I'm very, if it hasn't been apparent yet, I'm very laid back and casual about things most of the time. Um,
Yeah.
Unless I'm disciplining my kids and they drive me up a wall. But other than that, I'm a very laid back kind of go with the flow person. It's just my personality. I'm very type
Yeah.
B personality, right? Where my wife's very type A. The way she would write an email would be very different than the way I would write an email. But one thing that's really important, because you talked about this was an awesome point, and I think to kind of add on top of it is when you're being authentic off the start and you're addressing these people and you're connecting with them and stuff like that, like it makes the ask whenever the ask comes down the road a lot easier than they don't like reading your emails. They dread you getting in their inbox. And then when you ask something, they're like, oh great, now you want something from me. Like this is fantastic. I can't believe this. Versus you've built that relationship from the very beginning. And it starts with your very first email. If you set up your email, if you set up your onboarding sequence, like if you had the time to actually set one up as opposed to just getting started, which is cool because you can always go back and change it, right? But if you set the tone early and then you just continue that through your every time you send out an email, um, then when it comes time to ask or you send a poll out, like the response rate and the engagement you're going to get back is going to be way better. And then you mentioned something that I think people miss oftentimes is a simple call to action, like a little CTA at the end of your email, because it's going to do a couple of things. One, it makes the reader feel like you want to hear from them, which you probably do if you're asking them a question. But two, when they respond back to you and the email deliverability and like the whatever algorithm in the background of email service providers and stuff like that, they see a relationship between your email address to them and they see there's been people like you've had correspondence back and forth and you just decreased your chance of it ever landing in spam or going to their promotional folder. That person's going to be more likely to open your emails in down the road because you asked them a question, you heard them out. And then one thing I always tell people, and I think this gets missed, is if you can, this is going to be subjective if how big your list is and how many emails you're getting. For like you still do everything, which is still just doesn't make any sense to me. That's a different conversation. But like try your best to respond to every single person who emails you. Now, if
Yeah,
it's an
absolutely.
ugly email and people are attacking you, you can just delete it, unsubscribe them. But like if somebody's responding to a question you're asking, or if they're just saying, "Hey, I love your emails. I can't wait for the next one." Like, don't just be like, "Oh, that was so nice," and move on. Like, just send them a quick, "Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. I'm glad you're enjoying them," and just move on to the next person because I think that also is it makes a huge difference. It can pay dividends down the road.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just a quick note saying thanks for sharing or whatever is hugely valuable because people know that, oh, they actually I took the time to like respond to their newsletter and say, "Oh, like that's a really cute picture," or whatever. And if you say thank you so much, like just that, you know, that can mean a lot to people to for you to have acknowledged that they that they sent you something, right? It's just like if you were standing in a room with a person, I don't know. I always try to treat people on the internet as if it's not on the internet. Like if we're standing in a room, right? If someone says that, oh, that's a great picture or whatever, you don't just like turn around and then like slowly walk away, right? Like, oh, you say thank you. That's just like it's just what you do, right? So yeah, I mean, always try to just treat people like they're standing in the room with you, and they're just ignoring people when they're taking the time to say something to you is um doesn't feel nice, right?
Yeah, I think the way you frame that, I think is that the way now people can kind of conceptualize that easier. They're like, yeah, okay, it makes sense to respond, but like it's not the end of the world. But like, what if that person was standing right in front of you and they said, "Hey, I really liked your book," or that email was really inspiring. It's put a fire under me and I'm going to go do this. You wouldn't just be like you said, it makes me think if anybody ever has ever seen Parks and Recreation, there's an episode where Ron Swanson's sitting in the middle of a circular desk and a lady's trying to talk to him and he's just spinning away from her. She's talking to him, but he's continually has her back to her in a spinning chair, right? Like don't be Ron Swanson in the circular desk, right? Maybe that's gonna be the title of this video.
Yeah, there we go.
So yeah, I think that's perfect. Treat those people as if they're actually telling you this to your face in
Mhm.
person. And I think that's going to reframe people's mindset and the way they handle things like this. If it's an issue or if they're worried they can't respond to everybody, I think that's going to make a huge difference because I promise you, people love it. And it's only going to make your relationship with your readers that much stronger.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I respond to every single email that I get.
I
So
remember the first time you responded to me, I was like, is this really Evan responding to me? And then I figured out it was. I was like, it's the guy. The guy is responding to me.
yeah, and that's also cool too, right? Is like it's like, oh, I it's not like a virtual assistant or something that is responding to me. It's like the person who wrote the book, right? Or the person that made the software that I'm using. Like that is just cool. I don't know. I think that's cool.
Yeah, picture if your favorite author responded to your email if you sent them
Right.
one. You'd be on cloud nine.
Yeah. Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure.
And you could easily be somebody's favorite author for people
Yeah.
who've like you don't you probably are if you've been doing it long enough and you've got a big enough audience like there's a good chance you are somebody's favorite author. So treating them like they're your number one fan, like or treating everybody like they're your number one fan, like I just think it's huge. But there's one thing I want to touch on this that part of the conversation actually went way longer than I had planned it to because we actually went on some deep dive psychological aspects of email list and stuff like that, which I think is awesome. But just one last thing to touch on with the group promos, and this was kind of a I don't know if I kind of happened upon this by accident, but you talk about it too. And I remember mentioning it to it. You're like, oh yeah, I tell everybody to do this. You can join promos, you can also create your own promo. And here's the difference. You tell me the difference. I'm interviewing you. What's the difference and why is it so important? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean when you organize your own group promo, basically in terms of like from a uh work-wise perspective, like it takes maybe 5 more minutes uh to arrange to start your own promo versus joining a group promo. But one of the valuable things is when you're organizing your own group promo. So with group promos, all of the books on the landing page are randomly sorted every single time that a reader visits that landing page. But if you are the group promo organizer, you can give certain books premium spots where they'll show up in a section at the top of that landing page, and they'll always stick to the top of the landing page. And so you can then make sure that your own books are at the top of the landing page when you are the group promo organizer, and you'll likely see increased efficacy. So you'll get more subscribers or more sales or more people requesting review copies from you when you're organizing those group promos than when you're simply joining them.
Yeah, because it's like the above the is your phone going off? It's the
Yeah,
above the fold thing. I see you trying to be sneaky. So like
yeah,
above
absolutely
the
trying to be sneaky.
this is the first ever summit interview call out. Um, so it's like it's the above the fold, like you're right. So it's like if you can stick your book at the top. So and don't forget to do that. If you're gonna create a group promo, maybe you've never done it before, or maybe you've done it before and you didn't realize you could give yourself a premium slot. That's probably even more frustrating. Is your book is going to stay here. Everything else shifts every time somebody comes on the page. But like without just default, you're the first book. Your book's the first one they see. So just statistical, kind of from a statistical standpoint, like your book should have a better chance of being clicked on more, or your reader magnet
Right.
being grabbed more to get more people on your email list, or
Right. As
stuff
long
like
as the
that.
book cover is not like, really, really off genre or something.
Or like you created it in clip art on Word doc. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be on market, on genre. It needs to look like it. Even if you do your own covers, try to make it as professional as you can. Because I see covers all the time. People will join, and I'm like, I don't know. That doesn't look like you paid somebody to do that. And it says thriller, but it looks something else. Like it just like
Right.
and readers know, like especially people who
Right.
are avid readers, they get really picky about this stuff. Like they will know in an instant, like, yeah, that's my type of book, or yeah, that fits the kind of book I rate, or like, what am I looking at here?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean yeah, book covers are so important for sure. And I think that's, sort of going back to something earlier in our conversation, because we were talking about uh reader magnets. Having a reader magnet is really important. Even though you're giving it away for free to people who join your mailing list, that does not mean that you can or should skimp on editing or having a good looking book cover, right? um because for a lot of readers, this is their you might want to think about this like being a sample at the food court, right? Or at Costco. No one goes to malls anymore, but people go to Costco still, right? So I guess samples is probably Costco the better better example. Yeah, if you go and you get a sample from someone and like it tastes bad, you're not going to want to buy the thing. You're not going to want to buy the full thing, right? So if you get a free short story from someone and it's poorly edited and like doesn't read well and stuff like that, then they're going to think the same of your paid books, regardless of the fact that they got this book for free, right? So that doesn't mean it can have lower quality just because it's free, right? It needs to have the same quality as your paid books, because if people come to expect that people will just come to expect that your paid books are going to have the same problems as your free books if you've got a bunch of typos, grammar issues, etc. So yeah, I mean, even though it's free, you gotta make sure it's very well polished still.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even argue maybe it's more important that your free book
Yeah,
is because it's like if this is your first impression,
yeah,
it's your only first. It's called a first impression for a reason. If you have 10 books and you won't read through, and this is going to be the lead in, let's say for example, into your series, if that book, if the cover doesn't look good, if it looks cheap, if it looks like you slapped it together, if they download it, let's say your cover's good, and then they download it, it's full of errors. It looks like it was not formatted. You didn't run it through any kind of editing software. You didn't pay for an editor. Like they're, like you said, they're just going to audit. This is how humans work. It's going to be an automatic assumption that whatever else you have out there is going to be just like this, the quality, everything. So if you don't get that right, I think of it like going on a first date. Like you want to try to give your best first impression with that person, because you don't get a second chance. You wouldn't show up, I hope, in sweatpants and slippers and your hair's done and your shirt's pulled down here, and then you wouldn't walk up to your date and punch her or him in the face right off the bat. Like you're trying to give the best first impression that you can, because that's your only, you don't get a do-over. So if you ruin every first impression with every potential reader, let's say you do that for 1,000 people, one, you're probably not getting people on your email list, or if they do, they hop right off. Or two, you just lost 1,000. Hypothetically, you lost the opportunity to sell 1,000 people read through your series. Now, obviously, nobody's conversion rate's 100%. I don't care who you are, but like you just took all that off the table, and the chances that you ever get those people back, unless you make some drastic changes, is just going to be, you're going to, lack for a better term, you're going to screw yourself over from the start, and that's not what you want to do.
Yeah, I will say that the one caveat is with book covers, you kind of can get a second chance if you have a bad book cover. If you swap it out, like most readers, when they're looking through like cross promotions and stuff like that, they're not going to remember that that book used to have a different book cover and that it was bad or something, right? Like that is where actually you do get multiple first impressions, because each book cover is basically kind of like a first impression. So you can always sort of upgrade your book covers and make them better, and you can kind of get first impressions with readers that might have seen that book before. But when it comes to the writing, if a person reads a book, that impression will last with them. They will associate, oh, this author, this book, this series, etc. So having a bad book cover is more forgivable, for lack of a better term. You will have a chance, you'll have like another bite at the apple, or whatever saying you want to use, where you get kind of multiple first impressions if you swap out the book cover. That said, though, like it is worth investing in a good book cover from the get-go, because the efficacy, the number of subscribers that you will get with a good book cover will pay for itself, right? Like you'll get a much better outcome with a good book cover. And I kind of, I would say that a good book cover won't always necessarily end up, where they read the book and then they're gonna go on to buy the next book because like the first, your reader magnet had a nice book cover or whatever. But if you have a bad book cover, you're basically never giving yourself the chance to succeed, right? Like it's more like a good book cover is like a check mark that just has to be filled, right? Like having a well-written story is like a check mark, like it has to be filled, right? These are things that they won't make you successful, but not having them will guarantee that you won't be successful, right? It's like it takes away the chance to be successful. So yeah, having a well-written book and having a good book cover won't mean that you'll be it'll all be fame and fortune, but certainly without those things you don't have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think one of your points there was spot on. It's like in anything, we're talking about authoring, we're talking about like anything, success is never guaranteed. I don't care how much work you put in, I don't care everything you do. Like, just because you're the hardest worker with the best ideas, like, or you're the best author with the best, like, that doesn't guarantee you success. But there are lots of things that will guarantee that you will not be successful. And those are
Yeah.
the things that you typically can control. So it's like, try to get those things right as much as you can, the things that you can control that will kind of lower that bar of, being like unsuccessful. So it's a little easier for you to, because the way I look at it is it's all, it all flows through and it's all connected, like streamlined from book cover to title to description to your writing and then however many books you have, like, to try to make the customer journey as easy and frictionless as possible is just going to improve your chances to be successful. When things come up, like you said, your book cover or your writing's really bad, you're just putting a hard stop on these people where they want to do is find a good book, read it, like it, and then hopefully read the next one if you have a series and stuff like that. So the easier you can make kind of like that reader's journey, in my opinion, from what I've seen and stuff like that, is it'll just increase your chances of having any kind of success, even though it's not guaranteed, which is a disclaimer. Like, just because we're telling you these things doesn't mean you're gonna be successful. So don't sue us.
Right.
But like, yeah, you're spot on.
And the other thing, as since we're talking about reader magnets and sort of customer journeys and stuff like that, this is something that I frequently see authors forget to do with their reader magnets. They'll do it with their paid books, but then when it comes to the reader magnet, they don't follow that same advice. So for a lot of authors, in the back of book one, they'll put the first 3 chapters of book two, right? So that when someone starts reading, they'll get started into reading book two, they're much more likely to go on and purchase book two because they're already, 3 chapters into it and they want to see what happens next. So you don't need to depend on having like a super amazing cliffhanger at the end of book one where like everything's riding on some critical moment and whatever. Like you can create that cliffhanger basically within the first 3 chapters of book two or whatever the sequel to your book is, and have that act as your hook into buying that follow-up book. So when you've got your reader magnet, when it comes to reader magnets, whether we're talking about doing an anthology or doing a prequel or doing some side story or something to your book or your series, uh, put the first 3 chapters from your paid book, uh, from one of your paid books at the back of that reader magnet to get them started into it, and then have the link to them for them to be able to go and buy that book to keep reading it, right? So you're kind of combining the efficacy of giving a reader a full book, right? A full short story or novella or whatever. More people are going to subscribe to your mailing list if they know that they're going to be getting a full story. Regardless of whether we're talking about 15,000 words or 35,000 words, like as long as it's a full story, they're much more likely to subscribe to your mailing list to get it. But then you combine that with hooking them into wanting to read the follow-up book by putting the first 3 chapters of your paid book at the end of that reader magnet. So like you would have if you were giving a sample away, like just giving the first 3 chapters of your book away as a reader magnet, that can have a higher sort of sell-through rate because people know they're reading a sample and they've got just the first 3 chapters, and so they're hooked into wanting to read the rest of the book. But fewer people are going to subscribe to get that kind of thing. So combine them both, right? You give them a full short story or novella or whatever, and then give them the sample at the back.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point, and I think that does get missed a lot because it's like, if you're doing this for your paid books and it's a tried and proven strategy, why not include that in the reader magnet, which is going to be a lot of times these people's first impression of your writing, because they're going to be like, oh, I love this short story. I read it in 3 hours because I just couldn't put it down. And then they get a lead into the series of like the main first book. They read 2 or 3 chapters and they're like, I got to go drop 99 cents or, you know, 2.99 or whatever it is on Amazon. And then that just, like you said, increases the chances that those people kind of go through that customer journey. Which if you write in a series, the main goal is to get the person in wherever the earliest part that it starts at, whether it's a prequel or it's the first book, and then hopefully get enough people to read through the entire series as you write more books. So it's actually a really good point. I actually don't hear people mention a lot, if ever, is kind of a cool strategy. It's just anchoring those things like a chapters from your novel that's published onto your reader magnet. I think that's kind of like low hanging fruit that may not be thought of a lot. So that's a great point.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
mad genius strikes again.
and I mean, again, a lot of authors do this with their paid books, but then for whatever reason, they don't do that in their reader magnets. And so, yeah, I just and then you immediately say that to them, and they're like, "Of course, why did I not do this?"
Yeah, light bulb moment,
I don't
right?
know, just the context switching, right? It's
Yeah.
something about like just being a different context where they don't like apply the same rules. But yeah, hugely valuable for authors to do.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Okay, so actually, I think we wanted to dive into more, but this interview's already gone like over an hour, so I don't want to. We might just have to do another interview. I mean, because there's a lot of other stuff to cover, but I do know from doing these that once you get past an hour, people start to drop off.
Yeah.
Unless you're a hardcore fan, which if you are, we appreciate it. So we'll leave it at that. I think we dove even deeper than I thought we were going to into the reader magnets and building your email list, and then we did kind of step into also using group promos for the other avenues of universal book links, review copies. If you're in the audiobook world, yeah, like I'm not, but I know that Story Origin has that feature. Different stuff like that, but definitely the main focus of this was the importance of starting and growing your email list, finding the right people, connecting with the right promos to make sure these readers are targeted for what you're doing, the authenticity behind your authoring brand or who you are as a person and an author. Those are typically the same. Um, you know, your onboarding. We didn't get really deep into onboarding sequences, but that could be a whole nother talk in itself. So one thing I'll leave it on, and then I'll let you finish up with any last thoughts, and obviously we'll let people know where to go find you, which is, if you didn't know already, Story Origin. Is if you can, 2 points. If you haven't started yet and it seems overwhelming, just get started. Just try putting together the kind of the foundational parts or the pillars or principles, whatever you want to call it. That's the easiest to get off the. It doesn't have to be the final product, like you mentioned before. If it's just a single email for an onboarding sequence, that's like, hey, thanks for joining. I'm really excited to have you. You know, if that's it, that's better than people not coming into your email list or coming in and they don't hear from you for 6 months until you're ready to send out your first newsletter. Like then they'll be like, where did this person come from? So starting out simple. And then for me, it's keeping it simple all the way through. There are things that you can go back and change as you're getting used to it. Your strategies will change. Your tactics can maybe not change, we'll say evolve. But I still err on the side of caution when it comes to complexity and making things too robust and fancy. Yeah, you may look at your onboarding sequence and it might look really cool and um, you know, you might feel kind of smarter because you developed this really complicated onboarding sequence that only you could do. But like for me, because I tell people all the time, I'm the biggest idiot I know. And if you don't believe me, ask my wife, is if I don't keep things simple, like things can kind of go off rails quicker and it's harder to get back on track, right? Where if you start simple, keep it simple, even as you're evolving, just keep that simplicity mindset as you're adding new things in. The scalability of that's going to be way easier for you to manage. Um, and then secondly is just being yourself, authentic and transparent out of the gate. And I think that pays dividends both short term and long term, regardless of what your goal is. Just don't pigeonhole yourself into this early kind of roadblock where you have to figure out how to dig yourself out because you went a direction you knew you shouldn't, or maybe you just didn't know better. Now you're having to backtrack and whatever. Just if you're listening to this and you heard anything Evan and I said, just start off being yourself right out of the gate, authentic, transparent, engaging with people and keeping it simple. And I will I will stop talking.
And I would add on to that is get yourself committed, right? Like go and arrange some newsletter swaps in some group promos now, before you have anything really figured out, even beyond, how to design and send a newsletter, right? If you are committed, right, you said to other people, I'm going to be sending out a newsletter on the 15th of next month, and I will be promoting these other, group promos or these other books, right? You've given yourself a deadline to get it sorted out, because it's really easy to just keep pushing off the marketing stuff. It's so easy to say, oh, but I can write another, I gotta write this other book. I gotta write this other thing first, right? Very easy to do that. Very easy to push off the marketing. But as long as, like, going back to, if you decide that this is something that you want to make an income from, the marketing is not one of those things that you can leave up to chance. You gotta commit yourself in some way, right? And so just arranging or joining some group promos or newsletter swaps is one way to sort of just commit yourself in a very low risk way, because at the end of the day, when you've arranged all those newsletter swaps, you'll still have 0 people on your mailing list, or one person on your mailing list, which is maybe just yourself, right? Your own email address on your mailing list, right? So when you design and you send that newsletter, like, the only person that might see it would just be you. And so it's very low risk, low pressure. If you mess something up, like, it's not, no one's gonna see it. It's fine, right? So just, but still committing yourself by saying that I'm gonna send a newsletter out on this date is hugely valuable. But the other sort of question a lot of people would probably be asking is, okay, so you guys talked about, like, StoryOrigin does a million different things, and like, how much is this going to cost me? Like, am I going to have to pay an arm and a leg? StoryOrigin is $10 a month or $100 per year. I keep it super affordable. Many authors tell me that it's worth way more than it costs. But I like to keep it affordable because I want those authors who are starting out and have 0 people on their mailing list, don't have an audience. I want them to be comfortable being able to get started with StoryOrigin, and then all the rest of the stuff can come later. So and then the other thing is, you can find StoryOrigin at storyoriginapp.com. And if you ever have any questions, my inbox is always open. Like we've been talking about, Philip said he sent me some emails. This was like prior to us even ever having interviewed, when he was just using StoryOrigin. Like, he had some customer support questions, like, and he emailed me and I replied back. I answer all my emails. So you can find my email address if you just go to storyoriginapp.com and you just scroll to the bottom of the page. You'll see my face, you'll see my name, you'll see my email address. You can shoot me an email anytime. You'll also get my welcome sequence from StoryOrigin, which will come from my email address. You can just reply to that and that email will come to me. So I'm always happy to help people out when they're getting started. So thanks, Philip, for having me on and getting to chat about StoryOrigin and mailing list building. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too, dude. I could talk StoryOrigin all day, and I have on multiple occasions on other things. So yeah, I think we'll have the link. So for StoryOrigin will be under his video, so you'll easily be able to go check that out. Yeah, I think something that's, and this isn't a sale. Don't feel like you listen to this interview for us to push you to StoryOrigin, but it's like, we just scratched the surface of what StoryOrigin could do, because we can't be on here for 6 hours. We could have several different other interviews diving into other things that are applicable, but kind of for the purpose of this summit and what you're listening and watching and stuff like that, and other things you're learning. I think we focused on the right thing for right now. But yeah, dude, $10 a month, or I mean $100 a year. I think it's a crazy, crazy deal that comes with integration. So like, if you have your email service provider, MailChimp, MailerLite, whatever it is, like, that includes the integration and which you have to have if you don't want to manually export and import your people in. They just automatically go, which is really huge too. So I'll end it on this. So I know I told people I was done talking, but they know better. They've listened to me enough. They know better. That's not true. Is this just kind of adds to what you were saying about planning? Is this is going to sound really corny and cliche, and I know everybody's heard it, but it's true. Is if you plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So there needs to be, again, it can be simple. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be a year-long plan. I loved Evan's, example of, even if you don't really have anything to start with, just kind of start getting used to it, even if you're your only audience right now. That way, when it becomes time to start sending it to real life other people, it's a lot less scary. You've ironed out all the kinks and stuff like that. So it's probably a good idea not to have the very first time you do this be to other people, if you haven't at least tried to navigate and get used to it. And like I said, the user interface for StoryOrigin is super simple too. And again, I am not endorsed. I use it for myself, and I use it for private clients as well. So I do know the power of it, which is why I talk about it so highly. So Evan, the Mad Genius Gal, that's your new name. I appreciate you taking the time and explaining all this stuff. And I like that we dove deep into some areas that probably needed to be explained a little bit better. And you even took some things I said and reframed it that probably resonated with people a little bit better than the direction I was taking it. So, man, I appreciate you leading the dance a couple times in there. And as always, I love talking to you, man. And yeah, dude, I can't wait to see what other features and things come to StoryOrigin down the road.
Yeah, I'm always working on something.
That's right. All right. Hopefully everybody watching, listening, whatever, however you're taking it in, learned something, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.